Chapter 2158, Illusion Array. July 22, 2021. Translator, Silaven and Pew Pew Laser Gun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dul Liger Keys. Gongwen Shan muttered as he walked over to the entrance. Kong Chi couldn't help being stunned on the spot. His intention really was to get Gongwen Shan to go up and see if there was some kind of spirit array arranged at the entrance, but he never imagined the other party would agree so readily and without any obvious objections. This was inconsistent with Gongwen Shan's usual personality. Thinking this way, Kong Qi's expression changed slightly and he hurriedly stepped forward, catching up with Gongwen Shan and saying, "How could I let brother Gong take risks alone? This Kong is willing to accompany you as your brother, experiencing joy and sorrow together as one. Are you sure?" Gongwen Shan tilted his head and looked at him teasingly. Kong Qi's heart was filled with anxiety, mainly because the other party's expression was too unnerving, making him feel anxious in his heart. He didn't know which answer to give in order to satisfy Gongwen Shan, but in the end, he trusted his gut, grit his teeth, and nodded, "Yes." "Good." Gongwen Shan shrugged and continued to move forward, saying, "Follow me closely." Hearing this, Kong Chi was overjoyed, knowing that his answer just now was the right one, while on the surface maintaining a calm facade as he said, "Of course, brother Gong must also be careful." As the two people spoke, they arrived in front of the only entrance as everyone else watched. By now, the cultivators who were meditating and resting in the main hall had turned their attention to Gongwen Shan's movements and were closely observing, lest they miss some important clue now. Gongwen Shan's ability to crack barriers had been witnessed by everyone earlier, so if there was really a hidden spirit array at this entrance, everyone had faith that Gongwen Shan would find it. For a moment, everyone held their breath, waiting for the results to appear. Gongwen Shan stood at the entrance and carefully observed it for a time, his expression constantly changing, putting everyone else on edge. Only after a long time did he mutter, "As I thought, this entrance is just an ordinary entrance, there's no danger here." Saying so, he stepped forward directly towards the entrance. Kong Chi hurried to keep up. The two disappeared from sight the next moment. "Playing cheap tricks." Xiao Chen snorted, dissatisfied. Before seeing Gongwen Shan's expression change a few times, he too had thought the former had discovered something, but it turned out to be nothing, making Xiao Chen feel like he had been tricked. Lan Xun smiled slightly and said, "Brother Gong is a man who takes great pride in his talents. Speaking of which, did anyone notice that?" Xiao Baiyi suddenly came over to the two of them, looked around for a while, and said with a solemn expression, "Wu Chong is not here." Xiao Chen frowned, "What do you mean? What does it matter to us if he is here or not?" Xiao Baiyi glanced at him briefly before turning his eyes to Lan Xun. "What's the meaning of your look just now? Are you disdaining me?" Xiao Chen was immediately unhappy. Lan Xun frowned, but thinking of something, she muttered, "Brother Xiao Bai means Wu Chong failed to enter here because of Gongwen Shan's machinations." Xiao Baiyi nodded seriously, "I think so. Gongwen Shan may not have just cracked the barrier around the temple, he might have also taken control of it. Basically, everyone else has come in, but Wu Chong for some reason was excluded. There's only one explanation for this situation, Gongwen Shan didn't let him in." At this point, Xiao Baiyi let out a depressed sigh as he looked sincerely at Lan Xun and said, "Princess, this one is Azure Sun Temple Xiao Baiyi, not Brother Xiao Bai." "I know who you are," Lan Xun smiled, "but you and Xiao Chen have the same surname, so I can't call you Brother Xiao. I heard Yang Kai call you Xiao Bai before, so I just figured calling you Brother Xiao Bai was a good idea. Do you not like that name?" "I don't." Xiao Baiyi denied vehemently, a cold light flashing across his eyes as he muttered, "After we leave this place, I'll rip that bastard's mouth off. If we delay any longer, everyone else will leave. We need to move." Xiao Chen found it hard to intervene in this conversation, so he could only change the subject forcefully. Lan Xun turned her head and found that most of the cultivators in the hall had already disappeared, with only a few still standing around. Nodding, she agreed, we should go too. Xiao Baiyi signaled to Murong Xiao Xiao, who nodded in return before the two used their movement skills to rush towards the entrance. Ah, I fell into a trap. Yang Kai couldn't help muttering as soon as he rushed into the entrance. Because the world in front of him suddenly distorted and transformed into an empty grassland. This grassland was rich and fertile, with no trace of danger anywhere. In Yang Kai's field of vision, there were blue skies, white clouds, and the green grass as far as the eye could see, which was obviously not a scene from inside the flowing time temple. An illusion array. Yang Kai frowned, stopping in place and not moving. He was not surprised by the scene in front of him because he had a faint premonition something like this would happen before he entered. The reason was naturally due to the first person entering this hall being Gong Wenshan. Judging from his previous methods and style of dealing with Wu Chang, Gong Wenshan was definitely not as approachable and carefree as he seemed on the surface. On the contrary, this guy seemed to be untrustworthy and sinister. After just a few threatening words from Wu Chang, Gong Wenshan had locked him out of the Wu Chang and made him watch as others entered, tormenting him both physically and mentally. Obviously, Gong Wenshan was a man who sought revenge for even the slightest grievance. Kong Qi had asked him to investigate the entrance, and Gong Wenshan readily agreed, causing Yang Kai to have some suspicions. Gong Wenshan was clearly not a noble and selfless character who would do something to solely benefit others. Of course, this was also human nature. And sure enough, this entrance was different from what Gong Wenshan had announced out loud. It had a pleasant surprise waiting for everyone. The only question was whether Gong Wenshan had arranged this illusion array or it was something native to the flowing time temple. If it was the former, it would be easy to handle. In such a short time, even if Gong Wenshan was a spirit array grandmaster, it would be impossible to arrange too profound of an illusion array in such a short time. Perhaps Gong Wenshan had simply set up an array plate to slow down those who followed after him. If that was the case, this illusion array could be destroyed quickly. After all, Gong Wenshan couldn't have exerted too much strength to arrange it. However, if this was a feature of the flowing time temple itself, it would be scary. This was because even Gong Wenshan hadn't noticed any clues before and had walked in confidently. If this illusion array was so subtle that it was even able to deceive someone like Gong Wenshan, how could it possibly be simple? Worst case scenario, this illusion array was so powerful that all who fell into it would be trapped here for a lifetime. Thinking so, Yang Kai took a deep breath, calmed his nerves, and tried to comfort himself. I hope this is just another one of that guy's tricks. Saying so, he slowly closed his eyes before snapping them back open. His left eye had now turned golden and released a solemn, majestic aura that seemed capable of piercing through the void and seeing through all illusions. Yang Kai slowly turned his head and looked around, after a short while breathing a sigh of relief while a look of joy filled his face. Now, he was able to determine that this illusion array was not part of the flowing time temple itself, but just a temporary arrangement made by Gong Wenshan, because under his demon eye of annihilation, Yang Kai was quickly able to see through the weaknesses and distortions in this illusion array. After pondering for a moment, Yang Kai decided against breaking this spirit array forcefully and simply walked out along one of its weak points. At the same time, in almost the same illusion, Lan Xun held a light pearl in her hand. This pearl exuded a soft light and was dispelling the illusory scenes around her, allowing her to see her true surroundings as she walked forward. Xiao Chen followed her step by step, coldly snorting as he said, "Why does Princess insist on going through all this trouble? It's just a trivial illusion array, allow me to break it directly." Lan Xun smiled and said, "One should show proper respect for others' hard work." Gong Wenshan did not hesitate to use an array plate to place an illusion array here just to delay others a little bit. If we were to destroy this spirit array, wouldn't everyone else benefit from our hard work while we gain nothing? I don't plan on doing charity work here. Your Highness, you. Xiao Chen stared at Lan Xun's back in amazement, not having expected that after just a few days in the outside world, this innocent and kind-hearted princess had been contaminated by such wickedness. In his heart, he felt a great deal of pain. On the other side, Xiao Baiyi and Murong Xiao Xiao had both closed their eyes, as if they were blind, and were slowly groping their way through the illusion array. The directions they walked seemed random, but in actual fact, they were slowly moving forward. As for how they achieved this, it was unknown. An illusion array? Ridiculous, in the face of absolute power, nothing else matters. Luo Yuan had always adhered to the truth that strength was supreme, so even after falling into this illusion array, he did not flinch and instead pushed his source qi violently to blast his surroundings. However, those attacks, which should have been strong enough to kill an ordinary Dao Source Realm cultivator, did not even cause a ripple when they landed, like stones sinking into a violent sea. Although this illusion array was hurriedly arranged by Gong Wenshan using an array plate, how could it be violently broken so easily? The Gong family was famed for its proficiency in spirit arrays, and Gong Wenshan had already taken into account the combat power of Luo Yuan and the others when he set up this illusion array to ensure that even if they used brute force to crack it, it would still take them some time. The reactions of the other Dao Source Realm cultivators were identical to the top masters after falling into the illusion array. Those who know a little about spirit arrays tried to find array nodes to quickly crack the array. Those who didn't understand spirit arrays used violence. As for those like Yang Kai and Lan Xun, they were able to find weaknesses in this illusion array and easily escape with the help of special abilities. After consuming less than a cup of tea worth of time, Yang Kai had already emerged from the illusion array and the scene before his eyes once again distorted and changed, the blue sky, white clouds and grass fields suddenly disappearing and being replaced by a dark and deep passage. Yang Kai immediately withdrew his demon eye of annihilation and kicked the ground to rush to the end of this hallway. Arriving at a certain point, Yang Kai's brows couldn't help furrowing as he was forced to stop. There are so many paths. In front of his eyes, there were at least a dozen forks in the hall, each of them too dark to see down and giving off an unsettling aura, as if they were all paths of no return. Chapter 2159, Flowing Time Fruit. July 22, 2021. Translator, Silavan and Pew Pew Laser Gun. Editor and proofreader, Leo of Zion Mountain and Dol Liger Keys. With so many forks in the road, some would obviously be safe while others would be dangerous, but Yang Kai didn't know how to determine which was which, so he simply chose one at random and dove in. At the same time he disappeared, Lan Xun and Xiao Chen also escaped from the illusion array just in time to see Yang Kai's back disappear. Hey, Lan Xun showed a surprised expression, someone was faster than me. What? Xiao Chen was a step behind Lan Xun and did not manage to see anything about the situation ahead. It's nothing. Lan Xun shook her head before turning back to see that they were only about 10 paces from the previous entrance. The surrounding area was empty and there was no trace of anyone else. She knew how powerful the illusion array was, but she also didn't need to worry about the others who were trapped inside and simply said to Xiao Chen, "Let's go." Shortly after, the two arrived at the same forked path where Lan Xun deliberately chose a different path from the one Yang Kai entered. Although these passages were somewhat gloomy, they weren't completely dark as luminous stones were fitted into the walls at certain intervals, emitting a soft light. Yang Kai constantly scanned a 20-meter radius around himself with his divine sense, staying on alert for any possible dangers as he explored. Yang Kai hadn't walked far before he suddenly showed a strange look. Perking up his ears, he was able to vaguely hear the sounds of fighting and could even smell a faint bloody aura in the air. Shocked, he quickly retracted his divine sense, concealed his aura, and walked forward slowly. Soon, Yang Kai arrived outside an empty hall that, while incomparable to the main entrance hall he had come from, was still not small. The situation inside this hall was clear at a glance. There wasn't anything strange in it, not except for a pool in the middle of the room which looked a few meters in diameter and depth. Right now though, this pool was empty. On the left side of the hall, there was a long table with 2 spirit fruits placed atop it. It was impossible to tell how long these spirit fruits had been placed here, but despite it obviously having been a long time, they still looked fresh and even exuded a strong fragrance. These spirit fruits weren't very big, about the size of a fist, and their appearance resembled ripe peaches, causing one to salivate at their mere sight. Those are flowing time fruits. Yang Kai's eyes lit up as he immediately recognized what these spirit fruits were. He had previously obtained a jade slip left over from the wondrous pill Great Emperor's third disciple, Gongsun Mu, from below Yuan Furnace Mountain. That jade slip had detailed innumerable types of rare spirit grasses and medicines of the star boundary, as well as the methods to store and refine them. Yang Kai had already memorized the contents of the jade slip, so there was no reason for him to not recognize these fruits. So, flowing time fruits are a product of the Flowing Time Temple. At that moment, Yang Kai suddenly understood. Although he knew about flowing time fruits before, Yang Kai hadn't connected them with the Flowing Time Temple, but now, after seeing the flowing time fruits here, he understood. Flowing time fruits had a very peculiar effect that did not do much for a cultivator's cultivation. But even so, that did not decrease their rarity or preciousness. It was recorded in the jade slip left by Gongsun Mu that flowing time fruits grew in pairs and each one had a diametrically opposite effect. One was able to rejuvenate people, turning an elderly person youthful in a short period of time, while the other was like a time poison that could turn a young man into an old man in the blink of an eye. If one didn't know how to distinguish between the different flowing time fruits, no one would dare to swallow them rashly. Without mentioning whether the second fruit's effect was useful or not, just the first effect was definitely enough to make countless cultivators go crazy over, especially female cultivators. What woman didn't want to remain youthful forever? But no matter how high one's cultivation was, and no matter how astonishing their beauty was, the ruthless carving knife known as time would still leave some marks on them. As time passed, these marks would only grow more and more obvious. But if one had a flowing time fruit that could rejuvenate one's vitality, it was a different story. Even an old woman could regain her lost beauty in the blink of an eye. Of course, that was not to say that the flowing time fruit was only useful for women. For those cultivators who were approaching the limits of their lifespans and had no hope of breaking through, a flowing time fruit was undoubtedly among the best medicines to increase one's lifespan. It could return a cultivator's body to a state dozens, or even hundreds of years prior to when they swallowed it, which was equivalent to adding dozens or hundreds of years to their lifespan. To a certain extent, this was even more precious than an emperor artifact. After Yang Kai recognized the flowing time fruit, he immediately became energetic. If this kind of spirit fruit landed in someone else's hands, they wouldn't be able to do much with it, but in Yang Kai's hands, it could produce amazing effects, because he was an alchemist and could use the flowing time fruit as the main ingredient to refine a furnace of flowing time pills. This was an all but extinct spirit pill which could be sold for an immense amount of wealth. Yang Kai gulped hard, trying to hold back his drool, as his eyes began focusing on the ruckus at the center of the hall. There, one person and one creature were fighting. They were also the source of the sounds of battle Yang Kai had heard before. Impressively, the one who was fighting was Kong Chi of Seven Glories Chamber of Commerce. As for his opponent, it was a blood-red monster that seemed like a giant mass of putrid blood. This blood monster had a humanoid upper body, a round head, 2 arms, and a flowing amorphous lower body. As it rushed around the hall, whipping its strange appendages about, it released a thick bloody stench into the air. The light of source chi bloomed from Kong Chi's body as he wore a solemn expression. Kong Chi was mostly dodging while using sharp attacks to hit the blood monster from time to time, seemingly probing it for weaknesses. Kong Chi seemed to be a cautious person that, after encountering a strong enemy, would not make any aggressive moves unless he was certain they would be effective. Before Yang Kai arrived, Kang Chi had been dealing with this blood monster in a similar way for quite some time. At this moment, he had basically figured out the opponent's routines and methods and was now looking for an opportunity to deliver a fatal blow. How could I have picked the exact same path as this guy? Yang Kai hid in the dark and frowned as he mumbled to himself. Just now, there were a dozen or so paths he could have chosen from, but unexpectedly he had picked one someone else had already gone through. But it was also fortunate that Kang Chi had advanced ahead of him, otherwise, Yang Kai would be the one dealing with the blood monster at this moment. After scanning the battlefield, Yang Kai turned his gaze to the two flowing time fruits on the long table again, and a wicked thought came to his mind, one he could not dismiss after having it. While that guy has attracted the attention of the blood monster, secretly taking the flowing time fruit away, wouldn't be too much, right? Before now, Yang Kai had no dealings with Kang Chi, so there was no gratitude or grudge between them. As such, when this idea came up, Yang Kai had no qualms about implementing it. Thinking so, he immediately used his Nihilite's secret technique to conceal his aura completely and began to sneak forward cautiously. After Nihilite was used, Yang Kai merged with the void and completely isolated his own aura, to the point where others could not spy on his existence with their divine sense unless it was powerful enough to probe the void. The only weakness of this secret technique was that it only blurred his figure, so others could still see him with their eyes. The hall wasn't too big, and if Yang Kai moved too hastily, he would reveal his whereabouts. However, Yang Kai had always been a cautious individual, so he only moved swiftly through Kang Chi and the blood monster's blind spots. Because there was no need to worry about being detected by their divine senses, Yang Kai's was able to act unscrupulously as long as he wasn't spotted. In the blink of an eye, Yang Kai rushed up to the long table and grabbed towards the two flowing time fruits, wanting to stuff them into his space ring. Unexpectedly though, at that moment, a barrier of light appeared around the table when Yang Kai's hand approached it, blocking him from seizing the fruits. Damn it! Yang Kai cursed as he knew that this movement would expose him. And sure enough, when the light curtain flickered, Kang Chi and the blood monster, who were busy fighting one another, both noticed and turned their gazes towards him. Kang Chi stared at Yang Kai with a stunned expression, his eyes bulging as he never expected someone would try to snatch his prize while he was busy dealing with this blood monster. He couldn't help but tease, "Friend, your cultivation may not be high, but your courage definitely is. You're too kind." Yang Kai answered flippantly as he pushed his source chi and punched the light curtain protecting the table. Now that he had been found out, he could just steal the fruits openly. This barrier was quite extraordinary, seeing how it was still functional after countless years, but after taking a punch from Yang Kai, it finally broke. Yang Kai's hands moved quickly as he snatched up the flowing time fruits and threw them directly into his space ring. Kang Chi became angered, as anyone would in such a situation. After he arrived at this hall, he had found the two flowing time fruits, but before he could obtain them, the strange pool of blood in the hall surged up and condensed into a giant blood monster, forcing him into a battle. Faced with such an enemy, Kang Chi could only focus on defeating it as quickly as possible and then gather his spoils after. Never had he expected that Yang Kai would suddenly appear and snatch what was rightfully his right before his eyes. Huo! After the flowing time fruit was taken away by Yang Kai, the blood monster, which already seemed like a mass of hostility, roared furiously and rushed over to him, throwing out a huge, bloody fist. This blow, Kang Chi narrowed his eyes as he showed a little amazement. He had been dealing with this blood monster for quite some time now and had thought he had figured out its strength, but now it was apparent it had not been using its full strength. From the attack the blood monster threw at Yang Kai, Kang Chi realized that it was definitely not as easy to deal with as he had originally thought. Turning his eyes back to Yang Kai, Kang Chi sneered and muttered to himself, "A first-order Dao Source Realm, will he be killed instantly?" According to Kang Chi estimates, even if he wanted to defend against this blow, it would not be easy, so wouldn't a trivial first-order Dao Source Realm cultivator like Yang Kai be pounded into blood mist in the blink of an eye?